Alright, we are back with another video, and today we are doing a JoJo What If. And not only that, but would you look at that? Back-to-back uploads. That's actually kind of cool. But anyway, yeah. Minus from the fact that I was able to pull off a back-to-back upload, which is actually kind of rad. Today's What If is, well, if you could read the title, What If Whole Horse Killed Polnareff? Definitely an interesting title. So, how would this affect the part of Stardust Crusaders if our favorite Frenchman was sniped dead by everyone's favorite cowboy? Well, let's talk about how this would have went and how the events of Stardust Crusaders would have been affected without Polnareff. So, going into part 3, most of the story just kind of goes the same as it canonically does, up until we get to the fight with Whole Horse and J-Guile, of course. Of course, Polnareff runs in to fight Whole Horse because he's still looking for J-Guile, because J-Guile, did what he did to his sister, that I won't name off because, my goal. Anyway, so in this timeline, Polnareff and Whole Horse have their duel. Polnareff removes his armor with Chariot, Whole Horse shoots with Emperor, Emperor dodges Chariot Slice, and in this timeline, instead of Avdol conveniently shoving Polnareff out of the way, the bullet goes into Polnareff's head and kills him. Avdol's too late, and Polnareff has been killed by Whole Horse in this timeline. So, yeah, Avdol is too late, and Polnareff's now dead. How would this affect the plot? Realistically, Avdol would be angry and would probably say something along the lines of, he was being a fool, I knew what I was doing was right, or something like that. Like, Avdol would probably try to, I guess try to keep it cool, but at the same time, you could tell that maybe there's a bit of guilt. But at the same time, there's that part of him that would probably be like he had it coming for running into battle. It'd be a very bittersweet feeling, especially since Polnareff wasn't really even a member of the team by this point. Because if you remember, the only reason Polnareff joined in the first place was because he wanted to avenge his sister. In this timeline, since Polnareff died before he could even do that and even become a full-fledged member, the group would never really get the chance to actually bond with Polnareff. Granted, he was there for like a little bit of the adventure, but like minus from that, they never really formed much of a friendship. So, unfortunately, there really isn't much of that kind of bond they have with Polnareff, that kind of brotherhood they had. So, Avdol, while he would be sad, it wouldn't be this ultimate rage amp because honestly, he might feel a bit sad because he did see a lot of honor in Polnareff, but at the same time, he knew Polnareff was very rash and hot headed and knew something like this would have happened because of it. So, Avdol would try to fight off Whole Horse and J-Guile, and probably lose if you remember how canonically what happened with Polnareff. I mean, what happened when he first fought Whole Horse and J-Guile, and how, J-Guile jumped him, and Whole Horse was able to kill Avdol, which probably might still happen in this timeline. If anything, probably a lot of more effectively, because Avdol would not be in the right headspace because of Polnareff's death. No pun intended. But Kakyoin might have to hold off and not attack Olhurst and J-Guile right away. He might have to simply wait for Joseph and Jotaro to arrive to help him out, because you have Polnareff who's dead, and Avdol who's also dead, and I'm pretty sure Kakyoin would know it's best not to go out there. Granted, Kakyoin might be able to figure out what's going on, since he was kind of able to figure out J-Guile a lot quickly in the story originally. He was able to figure out how J-Guile was doing everything, but assuming that's the case, I still don't think Kakyoin would want to jump in right away in a situation where it's just him alone. So he might just wait for Joseph and Jotaro, and once the three of them are together, they can go against Whole Horse and J-Guile, where they would probably defeat and kill both of them. I don't know about Whole Horse. I'm pretty sure Whole Horse would probably still escape, with J-Guile probably getting killed by, we'll say probably Kakyoin, since he's probably the most likely to be angry at the fact that both Polnareff and Avdol died and probably feel the most guilty, I assume. Or maybe Joseph. Actually, probably Joseph, maybe. I don't really think it matters who kills J-Guile in this timeline. We'll just say J-Guile is killed, and they do avenge Polnareff and Avdol in this timeline. They'd probably feel sorry that Polnareff never got to be the one who got to kill J-Guile and avenge his sister, and Avdol is obviously still alive at this point, so he's probably just being rested up. So he's probably resting up. Meanwhile, the whole time, Polnareff is basically out of the equation because he's canonically dead. Now the question is, how would it affect the rest of... How does this affect the rest of Stardust Crusaders? So I will probably just go fight by fight here because realistically, I don't really have much else to do and I'm kind of bored. So how would each fight play out? So first fight by this point was the fight with Nina and Empress, and this was just a Joseph fight, so I guess minus from Polnareff's sleazy attempts of trying to make out with her being cut out, nothing would honestly really change in this hypothetical timeline, so that fight just goes the same. Next is ZZ Top, and again, the only real characters doing anything in this fight were Kakyoin and Jotaro. Uh, I guess someone else is driving the car, most likely Joseph, so that's really all I could really say here. Next is Inya, so off the bat, there would be no Polnareff trying to flirt with Inya in this timeline. It would be a lot harder to possibly beat Inya, because they wouldn't really know how she works. But unless, like, maybe Kakyoin or Joseph takes the role, I maybe could see Joseph taking the spot of Polnareff of trying to talk to Inya. I mean, remember, Joseph does have a thing of, cheating on his wife Susie, if you know what I mean. So maybe he goes after Enya, and then, Enya just goes after Joseph instead. Regardless, there's really nothing I can see here. Next is a fight with lovers, and this might be a challenge because this means Kakyoin's gonna have to do this fight alone. To be fair, Kakyoin did do fine for the most part, but without Polnareff, he would probably still need a struggle. We'll say maybe Kakyoin is just smart enough to find a way to defeat lovers on his own, but it would probably take a while, and it might need him to be very big brain, which he's probably big brain enough to deal with lovers, so yeah. Death 13, speaking of Kakyoin, this is just another fight that, no, also the Sun. Sun wouldn't change, and I can't really say anything for Death 13 either. I don't really see any changes here because Polnareff really did nothing in those fights. Okay, so the first fight is the Genie fight, and this is definitely an interesting one to really talk about here. In this hypothetical timeline, how does the Genie fight play out? So I don't really remember Genie's stand name. Sorry about that. But, I guess when it comes down to the fight itself, it would probably... I don't really know if anyone would fight the Genie in this timeline. I guess Avdol wouldn't cosplay as his dad, so that's one change. Maybe Avdol does it, but even then, Avdol was able to smoke around and just destroy Genie on his own, so pretty sure Avdol would have just destroyed Genie regardless, so yeah, we'll just say maybe Avdol, and this is his return fight. Same with High Priestess. Polnareff really did nothing in this fight, so nothing to count here. And then obviously we get to Nodal and Geb. So in the Nodal fight, there's really nothing I could think of that would change. One change is that maybe Kakyoin never gets his eye injury, because in the original it only happened because him and Polnareff got into an argument. Granted, maybe Kakyoin tries to pick a fight with Nodal to hold off and try to help the team out, so maybe he still gets his eye scratched out. But if that's the case, it's possible Kakyoin could also die after getting his eye scratched out. Unless Avdol comes into play and just saves him and then gets his injury like he canonically does. Which is probably how I think it would go. So minus from that, I just feel like the rest of the fight just goes the same. After the fight with Nodal is the fight with Oingo and Boingo, which really isn't even a fight, it's just Oingo and Boingo trying to kill Jotaro but failing miserably. And in minus from excluding Polnareff, there's really nothing I could think of this arc that would honestly change. So the assassination attempt on Jotaro from Oingo and Boingo, of course, still fails. Anubis is the next arc, and this is a very interesting arc to really talk about here. Without Polnareff, this fight is kind of interesting. So obviously we get the first fight with the dude, I don't really even remember his name, who had Anubis. Whether he fights Joseph or Jotaro, it doesn't matter. After he loses the fight, Jotaro is forced to deliver Anubis, but unlike Polnareff, who decided to randomly go to a barber instead of just, get rid of the sword, we'll say Jotaro probably still gets rid of the sword, as he canonically would have. Granted, it probably would have led to the police officers being possessed, but Jotaro probably just still defeats the police officers, if anything a lot easier because he doesn't have to deal with Silver Chariot, which is just a complete beast of a stand. So, yeah, Jotaro does not have to deal with that, and he'd probably just be able to take down Anubis a lot quicker. Now the next thing is obviously the fights. Now Mariah is obviously still going to be Avdol and Joseph's fight, and that fight goes the same. Alessi, on the other hand, is definitely a different fight. Maybe Iggy can just take Polnareff's spot in the beginning half, and that can probably just lead to Iggy taking his place of, I guess, going against Alessi, and then Jotaro having to be the one to save the day, like canonically. That's probably the only logical excuse I could think of from this timeline, so that might be the only thing I could see here. Next is older Darby, and off the bat, it would be a lot harder to, I guess, go with Darby in this timeline, since the only reason the Darby arc really started to begin with was because Polnareff was willing to be the first one to wager his soul. So, in this timeline, who would wager their soul against older Darby? Uh, I doubt anyone would. Maybe Avdol in this situation, but I don't really think it matters anyway. So, if Avdol still does it, it probably doesn't affect the plot, and everything can kind of just go the same regardless. But, yeah, assuming that the whole wager thing could still happen, I guess Avdol can go in at Polnareff's spot, and obviously Joseph and Jotaro could still do their thing. After Older Darby's arc, the next arc would be Whole Horse and Boingo. So obviously the Whole Horse and Boingo would probably change a bit because Polnareff did play somewhat of a big role in finding out about Whole Horse and how he was hiding and trying to assassinate them with Boingo. And this obviously led to the goofy scene with Whole Horse sticking his fingers up Polnareff's nose, and that obviously led to Whole Horse trying to hold Polnareff at gunpoint to hide away, and then Polnareff, of course, sneezing and revealing Whole Horse's identity, and, the shenanigans happening there. Do we still get that? I don't know. Maybe we get it with Avdol. I don't know. I don't really think much would change in this arc. Minus from that scene, it would be kind of hard to rewrite in this timeline without Polnareff in it, so yeah. For the most part, Pet Shop obviously just goes the same. And obviously the younger Darby fight is going to include Joseph, Jotaro, and Kakyoin out of the equation, leaving Avdol and Iggy stuck together. Now, when it comes to this, first off is the Kiniji stuff, and Avdol and Iggy are just able to find out Kiniji and just destroy him easily. In this timeline, Avdol would still do a sacrifice and die saving Iggy. This means Iggy's got to deal with Vanilla Ice alone. Now, if this isn't Iggy alone, with a missing paw, yeah, Iggy's not winning this one. Granted, Iggy can try to fight. I think Iggy's way of fighting would be a lot more different. He might not just make a Dio Sand clone, so maybe he doesn't make Vanilla Ice as angry as he did in the canon, because that was mostly a Polnareff idea, if I remember correctly, especially since Polnareff knew what Dio looked and sounded like. So by that logic, we'll just assume maybe Iggy probably just uses Sand clones to trick out Vanilla Ice. But even then, I do not see Iggy winning this fight. Maybe Iggy can still hang on long enough so that Jotaro, Kakyoin, and Joseph can show up at the end and help him out. I don't really know how Iggy's doing in this fight alone. Iggy's either dying or just getting injured in this fight. But regardless, poor Iggy, he's not really doing too well. If Joseph, Kakyoin, and Jotaro do arrive in time, Iggy can definitely try to help them out and kind of warn them about Vanilla Ice in advance. It might be too little too late, and he might end up getting someone like Kakyoin or Joseph killed. I don't think they would. Maybe Iggy can just save them with the Fool. But Iggy might honestly have to really try to help the crew out here. With the four of them here, and I think that's Iggy's best case to actually win this fight, to hold on long enough so that Joseph, Jotaro, and Kakyoin can get to him in time. Iggy might probably just get injured, but I don't even know if he can hang on long enough for the other three to get to him, though. I don't think he could. Maybe Iggy makes it, but barely, and I guess maybe dies afterwards. I don't know. I could see Iggy dying against Dio, maybe if he hangs on long enough, and Dio just simply kills him later on in the fight. Can't really... And I guess if we're talking about the final fight of part 3, I don't really think much would change. Maybe Kakyoin survives in this timeline if they play their cards right. Like, maybe in this timeline we could have Iggy take his spot, or maybe Iggy's still alive and makes a sand clone, or maybe in this timeline, since Polnareff doesn't run off on his own, because there's no Polnareff, maybe Jotaro sticks with Joseph and Kakyoin instead of going at it alone, and that just means that we probably just end up getting and maybe we just get Kakyoin surviving in this timeline because Jotaro being around means maybe he can just move around a time stop, distract Dio long enough so that he doesn't get the time to donut Kakyoin. I don't know. If they play their cards right, maybe in this timeline Kakyoin and possibly Iggy could survive. I don't know. This one's a little kind of tricky. Uh, I think it's possible to beat Dio. But then again, at the same time, if you remember, they did need Polnareff at the very end to help Jotaro before Dio tried to behead him. Granted, Jotaro could have probably still broke the stop sign before Dio could have beheaded him, but I don't really know what to say here. Overall, in Stardust Crusaders, this timeline is kind of dark, and it's kind of hard to really imagine how this version would go. I guess the best case scenarios would be if Iggy somehow just, I guess, simply goes the coward's way out in the fight against Vanilla Ice, which probably makes a lot of sense because he probably wouldn't do the Dio clone technique that he did in the original timeline because, Polnareff's not there to, I guess, inform Iggy the best way to go against Vanilla Ice. And in the case of Iggy, he'd probably just have to find new ways to go after him, like probably just making sand clones of himself everywhere and hiding away. And that would probably be Iggy's best case scenario to make it out long enough so that Joseph, Jotaro, and Kakyoin can get to him. And I think the best case scenario afterwards would probably be for Kakyoin to try his best to, would be for Jotaro to either Jotaro and Iggy to be with Joseph and Kakyoin, or I guess for the split up to work differently or something like that for Kakyoin to survive. Is it possible for Iggy and Kakyoin to survive? Kind of. It'd be really hard to justify it, but at the same time, I think you can make a small argument that one of them, debatably, even possibly both of them, could live. Joseph and Jotaro are probably surviving regardless, so I don't really know what to say about them, but yeah, that's honestly all I could really say for part 3 here. It's a very interesting timeline, and that's honestly all I could really say here. And I guess we'll just move on to the next few parts after this. Alright, so now going into parts 4, 5, and 6, I'm not going to go through each part individually. If we're going through part 4, nothing would honestly change. Assuming Kakyoin's dead, if Kakyoin does survive in this timeline for Diamond is Unbreakable, then in this timeline, Kakyoin could probably just go on to possibly show up in Morio. I don't know. Iggy could also show up in this timeline as well because, Polnareff. Honestly, Golden Wind is probably the big one we need to talk about. Stone Ocean, I don't really... we'll talk about Stone Ocean when we get to it, but Golden Wind first. So, obviously in this timeline, Polnareff plays a really, really, really major role in the final half. Because it was him going into Passione and looking into Diavolo, and everything just going all of that way. So in this timeline, how is the whole Golden Wind storyline going to happen? Now, obviously Jotaro is the only one left. Arguably, if he's got like Kakyoin and Iggy, realistically he could probably just send Kakyoin to do the investigation on Diavolo instead. So it might just be Kakyoin, or maybe Jotaro just does the investigation and Kakyoin just investigates Jotaro spots. I don't know. Or maybe they just go in together. It's hard to say. When it comes to someone like Jotaro, and Kakyoin, it's kind of hard to say with them. Same with Iggy. I don't know if they're both still alive. If we're going with Jotaro alone, this one's very interesting because it's hard to say what Jotaro would do. Maybe if he's still alive, he might be more motivated to, I guess, try to actually look into Europe because it's just Jotaro alone. Heck, maybe Joseph can do it. I mean, granted, Joseph was at a point where he really couldn't fight anymore, but if they were starting to investigate around 1990, as soon as Jotaro got done with high school, then realistically, Joseph could have just, I guess, helped Jotaro out. I mean, it's a year later. Joseph's probably around the same level as he would have been in Stardust Crusaders. Maybe he could have motivated him with his Hamo training. He could look into Europe and, I guess, deal with Diavolo. And maybe it just leaves to Joseph and Golden Wind? Assuming we're going with the timeline where, I guess, Kakyoin and Iggy still die, of course. And maybe that's Joseph who does it, and we get Hermit Purple Requiem. It would affect Diamond is Unbreakable for sure. As for how it would change in Diamond is Unbreakable, For starters, Shizuka would not be discovered, and not only that, but it would also affect the Red Hot Chili Pepper fight because that whole thing about it was to discover Joseph, or at least for Akira to reveal himself. It was because Joseph was coming and he wanted to kill Joseph, so that no one could, so he couldn't use Hammer Purple to figure out that he's around stealing stealing stuff, and stabbing people with the arrow, and all that stuff. So yeah, when it comes down to that, maybe Joseph's the one who goes, and that could be a pretty interesting scenario for like part 5. Like, imagine what Hermit Purple Requiem would be like, or Joseph versus Diavolo. I don't know. I think it's a weird idea that could work. Assuming we're going with the assumption like Iggy and Kakuan's deaths are just happening regardless, and those are like guaranteed. Assuming Iggy and or Kakuan are still alive, like if it's just Iggy, I don't really think much would change. Maybe Iggy and Joseph would work together, and I guess Joseph's gonna do Hermit Purple Requiem, get stuck in the turtle. And hey, in this timeline, I could see Narancia surviving because Iggy could just take his death spot. Uh, but yeah, if that's the case, if Iggy's still alive, then he can go on to Golden Wind and take Narancia's death spot for sure, if he's with Joseph. And Joseph can be the one stuck in the turtle. Of course, Bruno and Abakio still die, but yeah. That's one positive if we're going with that. And then if we're continuing this timeline where either only Iggy lives, or it's Joseph and Jotaro as the only survivors, or if it's Joseph, Jotaro, and Iggy as their only survivors, Stone Ocean just goes the same. So basically, if we're doing the Jotaro Joseph lives only timeline, then part 4, we're cutting out Joseph, so we'll say he's probably the one in Golden Wind in this timeline because that's just a year later, so Joseph could just, I guess, train on Hamon and just go to Italy while Jotaro's doing everything else. Maybe because Jotaro's desperate enough for help, Joseph just decides to help out, and he's the one who goes to Europe, and he's the one who gets to fight Diavolo, and he loses limbs, and all that stuff goes to Joseph. Everything that happened to Polnareff, it happened to Joseph, who probably also has help with the Speedwagon Foundation. If we're sticking with this version only, Joseph would just be the one who goes to Italy, and honestly, nothing would realistically change. Diamond is Unbreakable would have some changes, but those changes are not really that big in comparison. Golden Wind's changes aren't really that big. It's just Joseph fulfilling Polnareff's role, and to be honest, Polnareff's role was pretty replaceable anyway, so Joseph could have just replaced that role pretty easily. Now, assuming we're going with a time, and of course when it comes to Stone Ocean, nothing realistically changes here, except Joseph's stuck in a turtle. When it comes to a timeline where only Iggy lives, then I think Iggy would just go on with Joseph. Part 4 just goes the same regardless of whatever timeline we're going with. Part 5, I would see Iggy and Joseph having to work together to go against Diavolo. And it basically just goes the same as that timeline, but since Iggy's here, and normally in my Iggy timeline living scenarios, he normally goes on to die in the spot of Narancia, or he dies saving Narancia, so I'd stick with that. Of course, Bruno and Abakio I still think die, but I think Iggy would be able to save Narancia with his sand clones, so we'll get Narancia surviving in this timeline at least. That's one positive to come out of it. And when it comes to Stone Ocean, of course, nothing really changes, so still universe reset happening. Only real change from parts 4 through 6. The only difference between a version with and without Iggy is that Narancia gets to live in one, and Narancia doesn't live in the other, so yeah. Now, if we're going with a version where Kakyoin survives, it realistically just kind of leads into my Polnareff dying instead of Kakyoin. What if I did a while back? If we're doing one with both Iggy and Kakyoin alive, that could be a little more interesting. So, Kakyoin might be the one who goes to Italy instead, and I don't think Joseph would have really any reason to go in this timeline, and he could just stay behind and do his stuff in Morio and just go and become senile. Meanwhile, Kakyoin can just go on and maybe be the one who does the Italy stuff on his own. Or maybe Kakyoin could just deal with it in his own way, or maybe Jotaro can actually help Kakyoin in this timeline because maybe they have a better chance of staying in touch. It's hard to say. I could see the story really changing a lot. I just think part 4 and 5 could definitely have a lot of effect in this timeline, since Kakyoin might be the one who gets involved in Italy. And when it comes to part 6, if we're doing the whole Tenmei situation, so Kakyoin still goes on to have Tenmei, It might be a bit harder in a timeline where he's focused more on the Arrow stuff in the Arrow situation. If Kakyoin doesn't go on to have kids and doesn't have Tenmei, then universe reset still happens. If he does, one interesting scenario that could come out of it is maybe in this timeline, Kakyoin, if he's not involved with Diamonds Unbreakable, not involved with Japan and Mario, so Tenmei has only real connections to Italy and not with anyone from Japan. Maybe this is a Tenmei timeline where Tenmei brings in the Golden Wind crew. So maybe the survivors from Golden Wind, like Giorno, Mista, Fugo. If Iggy's still alive, then Kakyo, then Rancia. And maybe we get all those characters showing up in Stone Ocean instead of Josuke, Koichi, and Okuyasu, like my normal Tenmei timelines. And that is kind of interesting, actually. I don't know. That's kind of interesting to talk about. Maybe I can discuss that within its own what if one day. I don't really know how to kind of really think of it now. To anyone who's familiar with my Tenmei stuff and my Kakyoin timelines, I guess, if you want me to do a version where I guess the Golden Wind crew are there in Stone Ocean and the Diamond is a Breakable crew spot, like if you're familiar with my timelines like that, I'm willing to go into detail on how I could see it changing. Because Giorno, Mista, Narazia, and Fugo, or if Narazia's still alive, like if we're still putting them in here, like if those three, depending on Narazia's fate in this timeline, like if they're in Stone Ocean in the spot of like Josuke, Koichi, and Okuyasu, and like Rohan, like those could definitely affect the part because of how different a lot of their stands are. You got Mista and Narazia as your long range fighters. Fugo stands a complete insta kill, and Jarno's literally hacked within himself. Even if GER is out of the equation, Gold Experience's base form is still pretty good regardless. So, yeah. Assuming that we still get like Tenmei going into maybe Tenmei, assuming this is maybe like a timeline where Kakyoin just defeats Devalo easily. I don't know if he could, but I don't know. I think that this timeline is kind of like the Kakyoin dying instead of Polnareff would have, where there's definitely a lot of scenarios that could come out of it. To be fair, that Kakyoin Polnareff would have is still kind of a weird one to me. Even if Iggy's still like a factor, like if we're going with the best case scenario that Kakyoin and Iggy both survive Stardust Crusaders in this timeline, I don't really think there's much I could really think of here. When it comes to the, I don't know, this is kind of my idea on the timeline. I don't really have a full-fledged timeline in my head right now. I think that's the best I can come up with. I think that Stone Ocean is kind of a weird one, but regarding like a Kakyoin version, parts 4, I just don't really see any changes unless Kakyoin's like involved, and in part 5 is maybe also somewhat of a change. Maybe Kakyoin's in the final fight. It's hard to say how Golden Wind would realistically change. I do think parts 4, 5, and 6 could change, but I don't know how those parts would really change yet. I'd have to really think to myself on how to kind of make this timeline work still. If you guys want to talk about this timeline in the comments, if like interested in whatever, I'm cool with talking about this what if, because it is pretty interesting regardless. I do plan to do something similar with another whole horse killing what if, and I won't spoil it, but yeah. I will do another one soon, and it will be another interesting scenario, and I would definitely like to go down that rabbit hole. Overall, this video was pretty interesting to make. The final few parts were kind of a bit difficult to really write for, especially 5. 5's definitely the hardest one because Polnareff was really important. 6 is also pretty hard to write for as well. 4 is a little easier to write for, but still kind of difficult. Overall, this timeline is kind of just here. I think this is kind of the ideal timeline. If people want to kind of like discuss it in the comments or something, like if you want to have a full-fledged discussion on the timeline as a whole, like who lives and dies, like storyline effects, you know, if you guys want to do that in the comment section, of course, we can go on and do something like that. It'd be kind of fun to do. If there's any agreements you have, disagreements, any ideas you want to add, any storyline ideas, like, I don't know, I'm willing to discuss them. And overall, that's really all I have for this video. This one was kind of fun to make, and I actually kind of enjoy this one. I definitely will do my other whole horse killing what if soon, but I'm probably not going to do it for a little while. I'll probably do some other JoJo stuff here and there, and then I'll probably do some other stuff to kind of be more experimental on my channel, so yeah. Maybe another Danganronpa what if can come soon. Probably not for a while, but I don't know. This is my JoJo stuff, so I got that, and hopefully we'll try to get more what if soon on this channel. I think this what if went out pretty good, and next time around we will drop my next JoJo what if. Hopefully it doesn't take as long, but anyway, this is my JoJo what if. What if Polnareff died instead? What if Polnareff was killed by Whole Horse during the Whole Horse and J-Guile fight? Long video, but I think it was worth it. Hope you guys enjoy. Hope you guys enjoy my next video, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.